Mass Effect Andromeda has been getting a whole lot of bad press lately. While some of it is justified, I'm fairly confident that a lot of it absolutely is not. Let's take a look at some of the things that I like and dislike about the game, and whether or not it's worth your hard-earned money. Right out of the gate, we've got two major game modes, single player and multiplayer. I'll be honest, I haven't dived too deep into multiplayer yet. The few times I was playing it, I was doing so out of necessity due to getting repeatedly wrecked on a particularly hard part of single player on the Insanity difficulty mode. So I'm afraid that my impartiality on multiplayer may be lost, but I will say this. It's very much so reminiscent of Mass Effect 3 multiplayer with much more customization available this time around. There are dozens of different characters to play through, although, to be fair, the fact that a lot of them are male and female variants of each other is a little strange and does kind of pad that number. There are still lots of different options to pick from, but they're just not quite as numerous as they may first appear. The game is still centered around loot boxes, which you buy with credits from playing missions. So, just like last time, multiplayer is to a very large extent not skill-based, but rather loot-based. The enemies don't get smarter or employ better tactics when the difficulty ramps up, they simply hit harder and have more hit points and probably spawn in more numerous amounts as well. This increase in difficulty is supposed to be matched by your own slow power creep as you level up abilities and your apex soldier. It's not really bad, I wouldn't say, but the fact that you can't just buy the things you want and instead have to rely on loot boxes makes me very, very sad. What if I want to play as a Krogan, but don't get lucky in about the first 10 loot boxes that I open? The really good loot boxes where you're going to actually get good characters out of them take a super long time to grind, and if I can't play the thing that I want to play in a reasonable amount of time, then what incentive do I have to keep returning to multiplayer? It's a system that copies the old game, in that you can buy the boxes with credits earned in-game, or you can use premium currency bought with real money to get crates instead. This, in my opinion, is a very player-unfriendly system that pushes new players away from your game very, very strongly. Fans and veterans of the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer mode are going to continue playing this mode in this new game without too much of an issue. They're already an established market that has already bought into the game and the idea of multiplayer in this game. They're already sold and will play and will probably pay for some of these monetization vectors. I wouldn't call myself one of these veterans with gorillions of hours and every operator unlocked, or hero or champion, whatever the hell you want to call them, every soldier unlocked. I wasn't one of those players, right? I had a few of them. Like, I had some of the good ones. I think I had the N7 Fury was one of them that was supposed to be really meta and really good, but I never unlocked a lot of things because it was just way, way too much grind. And I have hundreds of hours in that game, and I still couldn't unlock everything. So, obviously, there's a little bit of a gate to actually being able to perform well in high-level content. I'm pretty sure that I was never able to play on anything higher than the second highest difficulty because I just simply didn't have the gear or the soldiers or whatever to play on that hardest possible difficulty. I just didn't have the stuff. It wasn't that I was a bad player, I just didn't physically have the things that I needed. So as one of these middle-of-the-road players who wants to play the hardest minions with a group of friends and strive for the best gear, things seem to be a little too far out of reach. It's a very inordinate amount of grinding to get my characters up to a high enough level to be competitive, and that's assuming that I happen to get the guns and mods that I need as well. This opens up a whole other can of worms. Not only are characters random drops, but so are weapons and their attachments. And you have to get each weapon 10 times in drops to get the quote-unquote best version of it. Getting the things that you want is going to be unreliable at best and has the potential to require a lot of playtime, a lot of grinding in order to achieve an optimal character build. Andromeda's multiplayer, despite all this, has the potential to be quite a fun endeavor. It's fun watching your character grow over time, and there's something rewarding about seeing that level up text flash on your screen, and then end up poring over your different upgrade paths in between games. But there's a point where the grind and necessity of seeing that level up becomes insurmountable for middle-of-the-road and casual players, and I'm afraid that Andromeda may be swaying too far into that territory at this time. As a completely separate point, multiplayer is completely client-hosted with no options of purchasing, renting, or hosting your own servers. Connection quality is going to vary wildly, and you're going to have wildly different experiences every single match that you play based upon how good the host computer and/or internet connection happens to be. In the case of consoles, obviously it's just network quality, but, that's neither here nor there. I wonder how much better the game would play if EA in general would follow the lead of Respawn Entertainment, the developers of Titanfall, who are working with Azure Cloud, Amazon Cloud, and some other on-demand hosting solutions to keep connections working the way they ought to in this day and age. It's definitely a pipe dream and something that would never happen, but man, it really would be great to not have to keep playing client-hosted games in 2017. Like, jeez. One thing I will say though is that I absolutely love the level of customization available in multiplayer. Complete control over armor color, weapon selections, attachment selections, you name it. You can really make your character your own and play them the way you want to play them. It's fantastic how many options that you have, and I really look forward to fiddling with my character every match to find the perfect combination of stats for my particular playstyle. Moving on to single player, things change pretty dramatically. The world is absolutely huge. There is an unfathomable amount of depth that will keep me occupied for dozens of hours to come. I could very easily see myself spending well over 100 hours in single player alone, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, keep in mind, this game has a lot of your typically hated fetch quests, where you talk to a random person A about minor inconvenience X, and you, the savior of mankind, have to go fetch them some DVDs from the library as soon as possible. That is a real quest, by the way. You do have a quest to fetch DVDs, basically. It's very ridiculous. The majority of side quests in this game feel like this, but then again, don't most quests in all RPGs ever just feel like this? There's always going to be a Mary Sue, there's always going to be a red herring. If you care about the lore, there's plenty of information scattered about in conversations, datapads, and other places that will keep you thoroughly immersed in the world. I managed to care about all that stuff myself for about 10 hours before it just got to be way too much and I got bored of it, and I started skipping most of that fluff just to get back to the action. I play Mass Effect for the combat with a spice of talking here and there, and this game really cranks the talking up to 11. It's great that so many people can have small conversations with you, and almost every single character in the world has their own name, which is a really nice touch. There's a lot of quote-unquote useless NPCs that do have fairly full dialogue trees. You can ask them a series of questions about, who they are, what do they do, and they'll actually answer you, and you can have a small conversation with them. It's actually very nice. Even if you never speak with these useless NPCs, the fact that you can look at them, and the game says their name is Greg, is a more important bit of minutia than you might expect. The atmosphere is great, but never becomes too oppressive. It never gets in its own way, it never gets in your way. The world tells you what you need to know and offers myriads of ways to interact with it, should you so choose, but you are never really forced to. Speaking of interaction, one of the best changes in Andromeda from the original series is the addition of icons to the dialogue wheel. Basically, in the original series, every single voice line that you could choose in a conversation was just a paraphrase of what Shepard would actually say. Sometimes it was hilarious or topical, but other times the tone given by the paraphrase bit didn't at all match what Shepard said. You could read his response as something funny or lighthearted, and he'd come off as a total dick when you selected, making you feel bad about your selection and wishing that you would have known beforehand. Now, instead of giving you the full line to read beforehand and then being forced to listen to your character recite it, the game shows a sort of personality icon next to the line that you're saying. You might see a heart for happy, a positive response, or a swirl for a strictly business, professional response. It gives you just enough of a hint to be reassured of what you're about to say so that you feel more confident in it, and it's absolutely one of my favorite bits of polish to a previously flawed system. I don't feel like this system requires any more iteration whatsoever. If it were to never change in future installments, I think that would be just fine by me. Let's move on to controls and PC settings, and then we'll hit a little bit more on single player last. First and foremost, if you're playing the game on PC, mouse input in this game is not good. If you drop any frames at all, your sensitivity tanks, and it's impossible to reliably aim at targets because of it. Sometimes you're moving at full speed, sometimes your mouse input is reduced by some unknown amount, or in bad situations where your FPS drops really low, it feels nearly undetected. For this reason, I play the game on the absolute lowest possible settings in order to keep my frame rate as high and stable as possible. In my opinion, 60 FPS is far too low for a shooting game. I feel like I'm playing in a slideshow, have difficulty aiming, and even feel nauseated. Now, this isn't a problem of optimization or anything like that. I'm trying to play the game at 1440p on, medium to high settings while streaming it on the same PC at the same time, so obviously the problem is me trying to make my computer do too much. But at the same time, if I turn the stream off and play on everything on low, I'm able to hit 140 FPS or 144 FPS pretty regularly, and I don't often drop below that, so not an optimization problem, but the fact that your mouse input suffers when your frame rate dips is not a good thing. Titanfall 2, by comparison, when your frame rate dips, most players do not experience any sort of difficulties with mouse input. There are some exceptions out there, for sure, but the majority of people, if they drop 5 FPS in Titanfall, don't feel a difference in terms of their mouse input. In Mass Effect Andromeda, when I drop 5 FPS, I can feel it, and it sucks. Next up, another mouse issue. Your sensitivity on the X-axis is different than on the Y-axis. Yes, you heard that right. If you move your mouse 10 centimeters right or left, you will turn a different number of degrees in that direction than if you were to move your mouse 10 centimeters up or down. This is unacceptable in any shooter, no matter when it was released. It's extremely difficult for me to reliably engage the floating remnant enemies because this game constantly requires such an uneven amount of mouse input in order to move your aim to specific locations. To make matters worse, there are offsets for X and Y sense, but setting X to the minimum and Y to the maximum made exactly zero difference in how my mouse actually controlled in the game. I'm not sure if these settings are supposed to be for controllers and not a mouse, but where they're located in the menu suggests to me that it is intended for the mouse, and it's just not doing anything at this time. Your general aim sensitivity is a slider only. You aren't able to input a number value for your mouse sensitivity. How are we in the year 2017 and PC versions of games still don't have a freaking text box to input your sensitivity choice? I'm not a computer. I can't count how many pixels my slider is filled up. This pisses me off a lot, and further makes it impossible for me to aim effectively in this game, since it's very hard to get that slider in the perfect location to match my preferred 12 inches per 360 sensitivity. I shouldn't have to trial and error while setting my mouse to the lowest possible DPI setting just so I can actually move that slider one pixel at a time to get it just right. That is absolute madness, and I might as well just use a controller. Andromeda also includes aim assist by default for mouse users, which in my opinion is pretty offensive to PC players across the board. To me, this says that BioWare knows their mouse input is wrong and sucks and has been wrong in previous games and they still haven't managed to fix it, so they're just going to give you an aimbot instead to make up for it. If you're going to default me to having aim assist turned on, why don't you go ahead and default me to narrative mode as well while you're at it? That way, all player skill is removed from the equation entirely, and I can spend more time staring at your wonderful facial animations.
I didn't expect that.
Or the face of a girl that hasn't moisturized in well over 600 years. Seriously, what? Okay, I get it. I'm being needlessly aggressive, rude, salty, whatever. You're absolutely right, but I feel passionately that if you want a shooting game to succeed in the PC marketplace, proper mouse input is essential. Separating game logic from frame rate should be the norm, not a feature. When developers don't appreciate these fundamental needs of gamers on all their platforms, it's very irritating to say the least. Let's move on to combat next. Keep in mind, my opinions here are based upon playing the game at insanity difficulty. Your mileage may vary. Things flow even better now than ever before. I love the fact that I'm not limited in my class selection. If one day I feel like playing biotics, I can do that, and then I can cheaply respec all my abilities in my ship the next day if I want to give tech abilities a try instead. You never have to feel bad about your character selections, or get halfway through the game and realize your build is crap, and lose motivation to keep playing. You can respec as early as level 3 or so, if not even earlier. This is great stuff, and I hope that this never leaves the Mass Effect franchise. Combat itself is fine. It plays well enough, and the new dash mechanic is fantastic. Things feel crisp enough for my tastes. Enemy AI is dumb as always, and enemy variety is unfortunately quite sparse. At this point in the game, I've encountered 5 different factions, and they're the Remnant, Ket, Milky Way Exiles, and Garan Exiles, whatever their real name is, I don't remember, and Wildlife. Each faction has only got a few enemies each, making maybe 25 or so different bullet sponges for you to shoot. On paper, this does sound like a pretty wide variety, but it's not often that you're fighting more than one of these factions at any given time, meaning that on average you might only be fighting waves of 5 different kinds of dudes. Much of the time, this honestly feels like it hurts the depth of strategy quite a bit, which is unfortunate. Now, it's not bad enough where I dislike the combat or the game or anything like that, it's still fun, but a lot of the time the variety just isn't there. The profile system is super interesting, although I feel like on Insanity difficulty I need to spend the first 20 or 25 levels pumping up only a single set of abilities, so I have a reliable base to build off of. Considering the game allows you to go up to level 80, you can effectively play 4 characters in one thanks to the profile system. So what the profile system allows you to do is swap between sets of abilities on the fly in the middle of combat without interrupting the flow of combat. Now, in order to prevent abuse of this system, whenever you switch profiles, every ability within that profile is set to its full cooldown. So let's say, for example, that you're running my normal build, which is throw, pull, and then singularity. If you cast singularity, pull, and throw, all three of those abilities, and you wait for them to go halfway through their cooldowns, and then you try to switch to a new profile, even if your new profile contains those same exact abilities, they are all put on their full cooldown again. So instead of being at 50% progress, everything goes back to full cooldown. While I can completely understand this for switching to a new set of powers, it doesn't really make sense to me if I'm only switching one power around and the other two are identical. Say, for example, I swap out throw for lance. Pull and singularity should maintain their same cooldown, but they don't. So this is a very, very aggressive way of making it so it's a lot more difficult for you to set up and then detonate your own combos, I guess, but that's kind of stupid because it's already very, very easy to set up and detonate your own combos within just the 3 abilities. So why they have all these paradigm shifts nerfed as hard as they do, I'm not sure, but hey, it is what it is. As I mentioned a couple of times already, I'm focusing on playing the insanity difficulty right now. I like the hyper-lethality of my opponents in this mode, but I find it unfortunate that they don't necessarily become smarter. They still randomly pop in and out of cover and sometimes will bum rush you from a few different angles, which is frustrating, but in a good way. It forces you to adapt and retry the engagement until you do it right, which is the experience that I'm looking for. However, Insanity mode is not without its faults. Your opponents become bullet sponges, absorbing multiple magazines worth of ammo just to drop their shields. If enemies are going to have hyper-lethality against me, I want to maintain some sense of lethality against them as well. It's unfortunate that this isn't the case and gets very frustrating in a few trouble spots where you just don't have enough cover to work with, enemies are rushing you, and you just don't have the DPS to power through these situations. Now, my opinion on this is in fact changing now that I'm about level 25, because I do have good enough equipment and abilities now where I can rip through stuff pretty quick, but I really need to set things up and get engagements in my favor in order to do so. Which, again, is a good thing. That's insanity difficulty for you. I have to think and play smart in order to succeed, and that's working very well. It just sucks that I couldn't have that experience until getting level 25. On the topic of squad mates, I've seen a lot of players complain that there's only 6 of them this time around. While disheartening at first glance, I do honestly feel that the game plays much better with just a few of them. When the roster grows to 10 or more, I stop caring about the majority of the crew and only care about 3 to 4 of them anyways. Like, I never gave any cares about Jack in Mass Effect 3, but boy oh boy did I want to hear every word that came out of Legion's robot mouth. Who the hell are token human male and human female from the first game anyways? Does anyone care about them? I didn't care about them in the slightest bit. Garrus was bae though. Let me put it to you guys this way. Every game had just a couple of people that I cared about and the majority of others I didn't. In Andromeda, with a smaller cast, it's easier for me to actually feel involved with each character available to select, and I care about each of them more. Well, maybe not Black Australian Man, but Drac? Please tell me all your life lessons, BB. Moving over to the fluff of single player. Voice acting, storytelling, writing, animation, things like that. Lots of reviewers have been trashing the game over this, and for me, none of this stuff really matters to a great degree. Video games, to me, are not known for their depth and amazing writing, especially not Mass Effect. At least, not in my opinion. This series has always favored breadth over depth, and that definitely shows in Andromeda's seemingly endless barrage of quests to complete. Janky animations, weird facial posing, awful lighting on character faces, bad camera positioning and conversations, these are really just not that big of a deal to me. For some people, these things matter a great deal, and if you can't handle that, then it's hard to recommend Andromeda at full price. But if you're here for the excellent RPG gameplay afforded by the series, and love tooling around with character builds, Andromeda has a lot to offer and will absolutely give you your money's worth, even at full price. Expect this game to take you many dozens of hours to complete. It really is full of things to do and will keep you entertained for a long time. If you're still undecided, think of it this way. A movie ticket will cost you well over $10. Let's make it a nice round $12 just for the sake of easy math. If it's a 2-hour movie, that means you could see 5 of them, getting 10 hours of entertainment overall. If it's a 2-hour movie, that means you could see 5 of them, getting 10 hours of entertainment for $60. In Mass Effect Andromeda, you can't even scratch the surface of what's available to you in 10 hours, let alone 20 or 30. This game has one of the greatest amounts of entertainment available per dollar spent in modern media. You might argue that the quality of entertainment overall might be much lower than 5 movies, and that's really a reasonable counterpoint as well, but it really just boils down to what matters to you in a video game. If you want good gameplay that will last for a long time, Andromeda's got something fun to offer you despite its flaws. If you can't get over its cosmetic flaws that we've discussed already, then this probably should be a pass for you until the price drops and some of the bugs are resolved, or an enterprising modder fixes some of these problems. Thank you for watching, and I hope that this review has been helpful for you. If you've got any questions about the game or comments about the review in general, please make sure you're leaving those in the comments section down below. I'd love to read your guys' thoughts. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.